I don't know how many times you've been asked to compile legacy data sets from a region in maybe Australia somewhere, or for us here in Canada. Like, oh yeah, well, can you compile all this part of this corner of British Columbia? Can you see whatever's been published in there and recompile it? And when as a consultant, like the first two times, that's kind of okay, yeah, sure, we can help with that. And then when you're actually asked to redo the same thing for another company, it's like you just shake your head. And can we not just get together as an industry, share more of this material and this more and it's such a waste of resources across the board, to keep doing that.
Today I'm speaking with Pim Van Geffen. Pim has a PhD in geochemistry and is an associate partner with ERM based out of Vancouver. I got in touch with Pim because of a post he made some months ago on collaboration in the mining industry. This really speaks to me, and I have been poking him for some months now to come on the show and talk about it. So in here we dive right in and spend some time discussing the value of being collaborative in this industry. What does it even mean? How would it work? Who would drive it? And what hurdles could there be? Particularly the sharing of data. What is the true problem with IP around mining companies' data? And our examples of Rio providing free access to their Hugo deposit data a start of what is hopefully going to be a less competitive and more collaborative environment. Pim and I also talk about some examples of data sets where value could be added, and we trail off a little bit into the data and QC space as well. We come back on point by agreeing that the business world has changed and society has changed. It's not about being the top 5 of the class anymore, an ultimate Wall Street-like competition. And we bring in a good book reference here to support this change in thinking. So this was one of my most favorite talks so far. I've really enjoyed the fresh and progressive thinking that Pim shows and hope that you do too. Let's get into it. Good to see you, man.
Good to see you.
You've been to PDAC? Did you just get back or something, or?
Yeah. So PDAC punched me in the face. I like to joke, but it's really just a cold sore from sleep deprivation and rowdy PDAC.
Yeah.
I just got back last week. Yeah.
Yeah. It sounded like a pretty big deal. Lots of people and lots of energy, and obviously the internet was
about 30,000, I believe. Yeah.
Jeez, that's crazy, eh? So
that was good.
Was it good? Yeah.
Yeah.
What's your takeaway? Is it where are we going, mate? Give us a 15-second summary.
Well, everybody's going into lithium now, right? All the gold miners are reinventing themselves as lithium miners, or
yeah. Well, that's been happening.
Hard rock lithium is all the buzz now.
Yeah.
I mean, still some couple challenges getting it actually, getting those projects on the go. But that was sort of the biggest thing. And the other thing is that like the whole ESG conundrum, it's still a conundrum, but people are taking it really seriously. So, everybody understands that we need to change, but there's a lot of confusion about how to get there. So,
Yeah, geez, we've been talking about this for 4 months now. I've been really interested to get you on the show and have a chat. And I've got the text here, and I printed it out because it all came from this post I saw 4 months ago that we talked about, and it really hit something with me. And so that's something I want to dive into, right? The collaboration versus competition piece, if we can call it that. And I don't mind if we cover a whole bunch of other ground as well. So interested to hear your thoughts about PDAC and various other things that are going on in the industry. I mean, you're on the ground in Vancouver, is that right?
That's right, yeah.
So you probably have a slightly sort of more local view of how things are looking over there, which is interesting. Like you said, lithium, I mean, every small gold company with some shitty exploration project is now diverting to lithium to try and engage their shareholders. So that's at least that's an alignment everywhere in the world. But whatever else comes to the table. But maybe before we do that, we've sort of been peripherally aware of each other's presence, I guess, in the industry for some time now, and we have a couple of mutual acquaintances, as you tend to do in this industry, and we both hail from the Netherlands, obviously, which is not particularly a land where they breed a lot of exploration, mining, or whatever geologist you might want to call it. We usually end up in the dirty oil and gas world. Even though most of my friends, well, not most, that's probably not fair. Quite a few of my friends are now ringing me up and saying, hey, this renewable energy thing, is that something that you know a bit about? Can you run us through your background? How did you sail into this industry, particularly with your background coming out of Utrecht in Holland? With a geochemistry degree, is that right? Is that sort of where it started for you?
That's right. Yes. So actually, my career, I like to joke, has been relatively linear ever since I was 4 years old, pretty much, when my mum would take me to these rocks and minerals shows, and I was really intrigued by the shapes and colors of minerals, and how did it get there, and how did they form, and where would you find those things. So that's sort of where it started, and then later in high school, we were exposed to what geology actually meant, and we did a little field trip to the Ardennes, and looked at actual rocks, which was quite uncommon for growing up in the Netherlands.
Yep, you have to drive for it.
But then yeah, I was at the end of high school. I was really looking for something to apply chemistry, because I was really intrigued by chemistry. But chemistry, all I knew about chemistry was that whatever we were taught in high school is not what you would ever do in professional life, right? There was no experimenting with little prefab kits and stuff. So I was curious about applications of chemistry, and then in the long list of things you could actually study in Utrecht was geochemistry, and that sounded really interesting, because I thought, well, if that actually would combine things like field work and lab work and academics, and potentially even a job afterwards, that sounded really good. So then I went to check out the open house in Utrecht, and yeah, there was this one guy, Roald Brouwer. He actually took me for a full tour of the department and showed me the labs, and he was talking about all these wonderful field schools that you got to do. First year field school was 5 weeks in Spain, and then second year field school would be 6 weeks in France, and then the third year, the geologists would all go to Greece, but if you wanted to do something in geochemistry, you had to organize your own field trip. And that year, people were going to Ukraine, and people. Anyway, it sounded really, really, really interesting, and I didn't need much more convincing to sign up for that that trajectory. And I ended up going to, actually, my third year to Nigeria for a couple of months, and looking at tantalum pegmatites that, in hindsight, also included a lot of lithium, which I didn't know about at the time.
Yeah.
And then I did my master's on a project in Botswana, the Tati nickel copper PGE, the Phoenix mine in Phoenix and Selkirk. So I spent some time there, and then when I was writing up, I got in touch with Anglo American, and they got me a job in Canada. They said, "Would you like to go to Canada for a few months?" I said, "Sure." And that was 18 years ago, and I'm still in Canada. So
wow,
that was fruitful.
Yeah, but you've started there, but you've worked for some time now with CSA. Although I just had a sneak peek to see if there's any update. But did your role just recently change, or did I get that wrong?
Yeah, so that's also a little bit of a story. So with Anglo American, I worked with them for a couple of years. They couldn't expand my work permit, so they offered me a PhD position at Queen's, which I took, and with the late Kurt Kaiser, that was really interesting. So that was still very much exploration geochemistry. And then when I finished up 2011, they didn't have work anymore. They let everybody go at the time. So I got a job with Dave Lowy at IO Global, and that sort of got me exposed to the consulting world. And I got to work on numerous projects in various stages of development all over the globe. So that was very interesting. So Dave Lowy and Michelle Carey really mentored me there in those 2 years to actually set me on the path that I'm still on right now. Eventually, I left the company when that was acquired by Imdex, and worked for myself for a little bit, and then started as an associate with CSA Global, and they kept piling work on my plate, and were eventually acquired by ERM, so Environmental Resource Management, a much bigger sustainability company. And people, still wonder about, like, what is the relationship there and how does it all work? And to me, that was actually a big pull and a big, convincing part to join this group. So I joined post acquisition. This is now 3 years ago that I signed up. And the really interesting bit is that, as a geochemist now from the exploration side, and having focused for the last 10 years pretty much sort of on the geomet, how do we apply exploration data in mining processing, to now also work with people on the environmental side and the water team and the closure team and people doing baseline work and and this environmental test work, and what do they need to know about the materials. And now we're pulling that in a much broader context where we're saying, what do we need to know about this rock to map all processes downstream, and we're integrating that geochemical data analysis with resource modeling, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit about how I ended up where I am now. So ERM is the mothership really, and I recently got sort of a half promotion from technical director at CSA Global to becoming an associate partner. So I'm on this path to partnership, as they call it, within ERM. So hopefully in the next year or so, I'll be able to announce that I've actually become a partner. Yeah. But now I'm on this trajectory of towards that.
Yeah, interesting, because obviously.
Throw in a little disclaimer here that I'm, what we're talking about today, like it's really just, as you said, my own opinion. So I'm not speaking here on behalf of the company.
But it's interesting to listen to that journey because, the environmental space, just maybe to start there, and particularly the comments that you just made about PDAC, right? I mean, ESG is not a new thing. We've been talking about it for some time. It's becoming increasingly more important, if that's one way to phrase it. And you just said at PDAC, it definitely was one of the the big topics in the room. Is that fair to say? And so is that, sure. And that has that a personal appeal to you? Because I without playing the sort of generationist card, I mean, we have that push coming from the younger generation. But I'm not sure still where to classify myself. But is that something that was always there with you? That's the point I'm trying to make. Coming into this industry, or were you not at all aware of it, or did you get into this at probably around sort of the late 90s, early 2000s, like myself, and no, this somewhere down track of my career, I need this environment piece to become aware of it, or were you kind of dragged into this by whatever else is happening in the world in that space?
No, there's always a component of that, but yeah. Maybe like you, I do find myself sort of in between those generations, and I have to be careful also how to word that, because I used to say we need both the old knowledge and the new thinking, and then some of the older generation were like, well, why do you call us old? Yeah. So I should say, the established knowledge and the new thinking. We need both of those to actually get ahead of where we are, right? So we can't solve the problems of the day with the knowledge that created them. So we need that new thinking and new ways of working with data, for instance, and we need to integrate that all with the established knowledge. We can't do without that. We can't just throw all the centuries of geological knowledge overboard and just work with data science only. I've seen a couple of companies try that and not be very successful. So.
No, well, absolutely. I mean, the data, and you'll have a listening ear here, because, I mean, there's so much value sitting in data that is just not being utilized. But maybe just to weave that in with what you were discussing before, do you see in the environmental geochemistry space, now that you're in a position where, I guess experience is a wonderful thing, right? Because now you've done a whole bunch of things. As a consultant, you looked at a whole bunch of projects. You're a geochemist. Now you're in an environmental company. You're working together with, closure teams, with water teams, and so on. There are not many people who have the luxury to sit at that nexus of all of those different disciplines plus the experience. Turning that into a question, what can you see? Is there innovation right at the fingertips there and we just need to invest in it? Or is it just something that will gradationally happen? Or are you being given the freedom to indeed be innovative in a role? Because, ERM and CSA, they have to pay bills by charging consulting time to clients. That's how we make our money. What do you sit on that chair wanting to do more, or are you being given the time to play with that a little bit to solve these problems?
Actually, both. So I consider myself pretty lucky to be in this space right now, because it's on one side the development of new ideas, and on the other side actually implementing them and providing these to clients. And we see that clients, there is more and more of an appetite from clients in this space. So it's not something that's it's not a very hard sell. It's just getting the understanding, getting getting clients to understand what we can do, and also from ourselves, like what can we actually achieve in that space? Because, as you said, like it's a pretty new space to be in, and the way I see that is more like it's not so much a tearing down of silos as much as a recognition that we all work in siloed spaces, and we just need to communicate better between those silos and learn a bit about each other's language so we can translate across. And that's I feel in the current setting, I've been given a fair bit of freedom to develop that sort of lateral collaboration, and also it's also working with the right people, right? So I work with a guy in Toronto, Samar Mahmood, and he's this really switched on geostatistician who also is fluent in Python. And we can now take sort of the drill hole database and vet it and do the lithogeochemical analysis in terms of classifications and predictions, and then bring that all the way on the block model so that the client can actually use that in their decision making. So that whole process, there is room to be innovative, but there's also a real pull from clients to they appreciate that. And so I think it's the timing right now. So we now have not only the data but also the tools to process the data to actually get meaningful products. And I'm really keen. Like I would love it if other consulting groups and other and I believe it's already happening in major mining companies as well, to do more of that lateral collaboration, right?
Well, I'd like to get onto that collaboration point, because again, that's really what originally sparked, the interest in having this call with you, because I love what you posted at the time and what you were talking about, and we'll get into that. But still, I'm really surprised and really positively surprised, I guess, by a consulting group allowing that freedom, because again, clients usually come with a fixed scope and not particularly with a loose scope, and tell their consultant, be creative and see what you can come up with. I mean, you're not being asked to create a painting that then they might like or dislike, right? I mean, there's a scope and there's a deliverable and all that sort of classic old school stuff, right? And so it's quite refreshing to hear that both within that company, within ERM and the clients you work with, that there is that realization that that's what's required. And it's not going to just come from people within the company, because you rightfully say the BHPs and the Rios, they've got their think tanks and their R&D groups, and I'm sure they've got a lot of big brains that are been given quite a lot of creative freedom to develop these kind of things. So I find it refreshing to talk to a consultant who both has that ambition and the support by the wider team. So that it must be seen, and that comes back to a strategy from obviously the company, and without going into those details as a would-be partner. But I find it interesting from a company strategy to allow for that, and that is critical for longevity and success, I think, as a service group as well. You can't survive if you just do the stock standard resource, send somebody a report and be done with it. There's got to be more to it. So I find that, that's really interesting to hear. And I mean, but then going on to the collaboration, so a number of conversations I've been having here, right? I mean, innovation isn't dead. I think that's something we can all agree on. You just have to look for it a little bit. And we need innovation in the space, and we need collaboration. And I found it. I just reviewed a paper yesterday for a conference, and it had a line in it that said the name of the deposit has been, changed to retain IP or something like that. And I was like, okay, what are we retaining? What is the IP here that you're protecting? It's a deposit. It's yours. You're not doing anything special. And I think the special thing that you're doing, you're actually publishing in this paper. So what is the purpose of hiding all this stuff? And a second point to that, before I pass it back to you after this monologue, I mean, Rio Tinto has just made available, their data for their key deposit, freely available for us all to look at and do a resource estimate on. That's what I love, and I think if we have more of that, we do a lot better as an industry. So I'm in a collaborative space, but I also saw some comments on there that that woke new age thinking isn't going to get us out of the, it's only going to get us deeper in trouble, which I always love reading these comments. But can you give us a rundown of what your view on this collaboration piece is?
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. Like, I don't know how many times you've been asked to compile legacy data sets from a region in maybe Australia somewhere, or for us here in Canada. Like, oh yeah, well, can you compile all this part of this corner of
It's been
British
done before.
Columbia? Can you see whatever's been published in there and recompile it? And when as a consultant, like the first two times, that's kind of okay, yeah, sure, we can help with that. And then when you're actually asked to redo the same thing for another company, it's like you just shake your head and
Hmm.
can we not just get together as an industry, share more of this material and this more and it's such a waste of resources across the board, to keep doing that.
Hmm.
And that's just one example. And what you're saying now about Rio, like actual deposit data, which is perhaps a bit more sensitive. That yeah, that it's great. Everybody loves it when people do it. So why don't we do it more? And there's I understand that there's commercial sensitivities around this and stock market sensitivities around active projects and operating mines. Um,
Of course.
Still, though,
Mm.
there are ways of anonymizing this, and I'm not an expert in the field, but there are ways. The data scientists have set up all kinds of infrastructure for us to make this easier, right? Some things like federated learning. Again, I'm
Yeah.
not an expert in the space, but what I know about it is that if you have a couple of parties sign up for it, you can completely anonymized learn from each other's data and learn
Yeah.
so much more.
And I think this is actually what Michiel, our joint friend, was,
Hmm.
I think, involved with. So maybe I should have a chat to him about this because I think he mentioned how that kind of works, but it went right at the top of my head. But that's right, and I think that's where the real value lies in moving forward, particularly now with AI that runs on data, right? I mean, you need to feed the thing something, and if you would somehow be able to I don't know, multiply the amount of data that you have available by whatever factor, that would be a gigantic improvement in how we can utilize those techniques. So is okay. So that said, what do we need to do to get there? Who plays a role in what? Because the OSMM, for instance, that I like to sort of devote some time to here and there is focusing on systems to get people together more. I mean, that's probably not the best way to describe it, but and at some point that will hopefully drift into the data space as well, right? We have
Yeah.
ResearchGate now because, I mean, why the hell would you publish something in minerals and then ask for people to pay for that in an environment where everything is going to be free? I can publish something on my LinkedIn account. I get more views of that paper than I would otherwise get, and the peer review isn't necessarily isn't everything what it used to be either, right? So what are the components to get us there?
Well, yeah. So also, there's other groups out there who are really trying to facilitate this more. I think you know the some of the collaborative research spaces like CSIRO, CRCs.
Sorry. Yeah.
Those are, I think, really, they're not quite public, but they're semi. There's still a lot of research that comes out of that does get published. Um, so that's where we have private companies actually come together and say we need with the service providers to say let's solve these problems. So a particular set of problems, let's put all our resources into that to solve those, and then getting the academics involved to actually sit down with the data and go through that, and et cetera, et cetera. So I was involved with one of those, and I promised you a little anecdote last time we talked, where this was happening, and there was one party that had provided a full on mine drill hole database with all the the stopes and all the structural information, and essentially a full mine database for people to work with and learn from, and for the students to interact with, and as part of this collaborative research initiative. And we're sitting around the table with some representatives of gold companies and uranium companies and some other companies, and they said, well, it's a VMS system, nobody cares about that. and I just sat there and was thinking, like, you guys, any of you could have done this, right?
Mm.
So here we should commend this company who did this. Why? What's stopping you from making a data set available?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, right. And then it was like, oh yeah, maybe this mine that closed 2 years ago, perhaps we could use. Yeah, maybe. So
Mm-hmm.
it was just this failure to understand that they could play a major part in this if they were a bit more open in sharing. So
But
I
it's
do
got a
feel
sign.
that, that's the space, sort of the CRCs, where maybe bit by bit we can really start that, and perhaps with some encouragement of examples where it works.
Well, I
But yeah,
think
of
if
course,
somebody
who
needs to
wants
lead that discussion, because I can also imagine if you work for a company like that, I mean, you probably already at that high level work your 55 hours a week, right? Keeping mines going and exploration teams out there drilling holes, and to really see the value in that sharing, you need to be working at a pretty big picture level, right? And forward thinking, and need to weave that all the way, that probably needs to be going to the board at some point for a discussion. I mean, there's quite a bit of front footing required. So in terms of who takes the lead, those institutions, I mean, Amira in Australia or across the world, I guess, is another example. And for them in groups like that, to bring these companies together, and maybe we should just generate a name, some silly acronym with too many letters that nobody can remember, and actually turn it into its own thing. Is that maybe, and put a group of people around that are focused on just that, right? And getting data and projects, and then having some protective system around that again I was discussing with Michiel the other day, and really invest in that. I mean, and then companies can just support that, and then the feedback loop will come when it's their turn to talk to the company and work out what they have available. I mean, is that just a crazy thought? I mean, given all the other groups that we've been able to set up, that can't be that difficult.
Well, yeah, I guess Amira would be a good candidate as a platform. So either one of us could reach out to them and say, hey, would you be interested in it, like this? Here's this idea. All we need is a couple of mid-tier major companies to sign up for this sort of this federated learning plan. And we have, so even though talk to Michiel, but although last time I talked to him, he said he's also not the expert in that space. But I get the concept, and it's really this idea that you can have complex algorithms work on data that is distributed on people's companies' databases, and it reads into those, but whatever comes out of it is completely anonymous, right? So there's no way of tracking back what database it came from or who provided what data. So it's this idea that you can tap into multiple databases, learn from all of it in one space, and not to be I don't want to put any funny claims out here, because I don't know exactly how they work, but there are groups out there who they claim to do AI for mineral exploration, or for who work in this data science space. And they work with client databases all the time. Like, what's not to say that they are, and some of them are, I guess, are pretty open about this, or less so, whether they put all the data in their big learning system to learn from it internally. Of course, that might improve their client services. But why, if we can do it in an anonymized way where we actually collaborate and all learn from it as an industry, to be less. Now, who's gonna mine your asset if you don't do it? Like, who's gonna come in and take your resources?
Yeah, exactly.
Why not be a bit more upfront about it? Yeah.
No, I think we're obviously preaching to the converted here, but there are so many low-hanging fruit, so much low-hanging fruit there. I mean, to this day, we're still discussing the precision of our duplicates, right? Surely, after all these years of collecting 1 billion duplicates on all these programs around the world from all these different drill rigs, there is a data set there that we can learn from to actually really work out where these margins of performance lie, depending on the purpose and so on, right? And resource estimation, your varigrams, I mean, it must be so, quote unquote, easy to just look at 1,000 estimates for a particular gold style. Now, they're all different. I get all that sort of stuff, but there must be a learning in collecting all the data and looking at that. And that's why I'm so interested in the outcomes of this Parker Challenge as well, right? I mean, 60 people looking at the same deposit. What comes out of that and what can we learn from that? I mean, and if you would have free access to all that information, I mean, I bet if you have an algorithm crawling CDAR for variogram settings of some sort, you would probably drag all of that out, put it all in a database and learn from it. And it would be much easier if people make that all available. And in the geochemistry space, it's the same, obviously. So, yeah. Right, let's start now.
Well, it's true on the one side. On the other side, it's also, would you trust, like, where do you put your trust in the average of the 60 different researchers who put their thoughts together? Or
the Dutch
how
would say,
how do you validate that, right? So
the Dutch would say, break me the bek niet open, because that's obviously a can of worms that will never be closed. But this is exactly what we're discussing with the Parker Challenge now, right? Because the mean or the median of those estimates clearly is not the right one necessarily, right? And there's no prize for being close to the median or the mean or whatever other metric you would use, right? Because you don't know what biases are sitting in there. So it is absolutely, you're right. But there is accuracy and there's variance, right? So there's always something to learn from the variance itself. That then in itself is interesting. If everybody sort of sits very close to each other, or you might have two populations, and one might be geostatisticians and one might be geologists, right? I mean, and you can keep going with that little story. And they're not necessarily, I think people, when I talk about this, people get too focused on that you can't do this, or that won't work. And, but I'm never deterred by that, because it doesn't have to necessarily come with a fixed answer of, 1 + 1 = 2. There is going to be a learning in the data. And
So here I want to just add one more thought. And this is one of the big reasons for me to sort of drift from exploration more into the operational space now, is this idea that there's data for actual reconciliation, which people, especially, companies are very, very keeping those cards to their chest, right? There are very few examples out there of proper reconciliation against original resource estimates. Now, that is where the real, proof in pudding would be is if you can convince companies to actually work through this and say, okay, well, let's pull up the old resources and see how well did it actually perform, and which ones give us a more truthful and reliable.
No, I don't disagree with that, but
the explanation.
The problem that you're getting into, and I was just discussing this with Scott Dunham the other day, this exact topic. The problem with reconciliation is that reconciliation itself is a gigantic minefield, right? Because the data that you're using there is from sample points that are not fit for purpose. The way you're dealing with it over the time frames, with stuff locked up in process, and 100 factors that have so much variance, that when you end up comparing the means, if you simplify it down to a simple mean comparison between point A or P1 or F1 or whatever the hell you want to call it, you're comparing points with two variances that are so wide that you're really not really practicing science anymore. So the reconciliation on paper, it looks great, but having gone through this a few times for clients on sites, it's never that easy. And it should be the answer if you would fully have control over that process, and you would have all your sampling points in control, and you understand what you're doing with accuracy and precision of each measurement point. But geez, reconciliation, in my view, I mean, I haven't been to a place yet where that is demonstrably working to a level where you can say, okay, yes, that resource is what it is. It's difficult. So but that's obviously the enjoyment in this entire in this. There is data, and I'm sure that if there would be enough of that, enough reconciliation data for enough mines, that there would be a signal in there that you can work with. So
here's the thing. Historically, and up till now, that might not be the case. But the point is the same as with exploration data, as we discussed earlier. The analytical tools, the measurement tools, and the data, the analytics tools are now all available to do it right. Mm-hmm. right? To keep track of your full flow sheet and keep track of your materials throughout the flow sheet. And sure, not all operations are set up for this. Some are better than others. But here's a real incentive to do that and to do it much better than we've ever done it before. Like, why not? You don't have to put sensors on every rock, but you know, in terms of keeping track of the materials throughout the system, unless you have a very large ROM pad with huge stockpiles blending stuff over months, it should be possible and reasonably, you know, possible to keep track of that and to track it throughout the process, and therefore then also be able to reconcile it.
No, look, you're right. And I had to smile just now because I always joke, should is that one word in the English language that's always puzzled me, because particularly when it comes to these things, or IT, yes, it should really work. Yes, but it's not working. I can tell you, I'm staring at it. It's not. I mean, it should. But we are where we are because clearly it isn't. And there's a whole bunch of barriers in there. But I guess we're getting lost in the weeds there. I mean, the point is that, yeah, I mean, there's opportunity in data and nobody's denying that. And I think coming back on point a little bit, I think it would be worthwhile discussing some sort of centralized effort around collaboration and data sharing. I mean, collaboration itself is obviously already happening in too many places. And Amara, again, is a good example, right? And that's good. But with a specific focus on data sharing, that is a very key personal focus of mine, because again, as a consultant, you see a lot of data sets and you just know the value. I've got so many different sheets of precision. I mean, grab something super simple that a lot of exploration geologists would be fully across, right? You have your duplicates, but it's just your program. What are you going to do with that number or those data? What beyond the scatter plot are you doing to tell me something about these duplicates? And the answer is you have nothing other than, yeah, that looks all right. You know, and that simple example is what I use. If you would have 1,000 programs of duplicate data, you would be able to say something about it. And that doesn't mean that something is suddenly good and something is bad, but you'll learn something. And I think if we set up a platform for data sharing somehow, or not a platform, that sounds a little bit, you know, let's do a website and it'll be done. I mean, a focused effort on it with through a centralized body of some sort. But anyway, I mean, if somebody has something smart to say about this, I'm sure we'll hear it in the comments. But that's, as a geochemist, go.
Yeah. So again, this also goes back a little bit to the educated investor, right? So I think it's up to us also to educate ourselves first, and then our investors in terms of, what do you accept for uncertainty, right? So there's uncertainty in your data. So precision accuracy of a lab, and because of all the, you know, the QC examples always go to the lab and love to, you know, pull the lab apart about what's going wrong.
Yeah, it's not the lab. Yeah.
But it's usually not the lab. It's usually the nature of your system or the way that the samples were taken. It's really, it also goes back to the field. Yeah. So what uncertainty are you willing to accept? And this is where, if you look at precision, if you look at your duplicate data, especially field duplicates for nuggety gold deposits in, you know, half core or quarter core, even worse, you know, what do you expect?
Yeah.
What do you expect to see? And on top of that, what are you willing to live with in terms of uncertainty? And that, you know, and in the junior space, we have a lot of people who are deciding between cannabis stock and gold stock because, you know, where's the best bet right now. So there's not a lot of education there in terms of, you know, what makes a good program, a good project.
Well, I mean, obviously we can't ever expect the investor. I mean, this is perhaps more of a Canadian problem that's been floating out there. I mean, how much detail goes into one of these CDAR report, one of these NR 43-101 reports? Do the investors really need to read, you know, 55 different plots of your varigrams for these 12 different domains, right? Probably not. I don't think the investors will ever be required to understand at that level, but obviously the qualified person in your neck of the woods needs to be able to take that on and tie that uncertainty to the purpose, which in my mind, the only purpose that we can actually put a line under is the resource classification that you are aiming to achieve with whatever program. If you're at a mine, you'll have You'll have deliverables for amount of inferred, indicated, and measured. That's what you're working towards. So your data need to be, of a certain precision to be acceptable to achieve that, right? And if you don't link those two, you will forever just be eyeballing a scatter plot. And that entire discussion, I believe, in our industry is missing. People just take duplicates and then say, yeah, look, those are duplicates and they're very nuggety. And actually most people, to use your example of the half core in the nuggety gold, they stop taking them because the variance that they're seeing, but actually missing the point that it's not about seeing too much variance, it's about seeing the variance and then either improving it by changing something or reducing it, right? Yeah. So I feel and this is now getting us into a whole different discussion, but an interesting one nonetheless. I mean, the purpose is not always clear, and I think that capturing that uncertainty, we can, to try and bring it back on point, we can only do that, particularly when it comes to variance, by comparing it with other projects and then trying to somehow link it to project success or failure. Because at the end of the day, the mine is not going to topple over because of the freaking duplicates, right? There is a learning there. It's not a red flag that it only tells you got a lot of variance either in your sampling or the natural inherent variability of your ore, and you need to do something about that or learn something about that, or either take more samples or bigger samples, right? Or more correct samples. So that's that uncertainty thing, we're grappling with that now with geological uncertainty, which is all the rage at the moment to try and capture that smartly and quantitatively, right? I'm not sure if you're playing in that field at all, but...
Yeah, I've dabbled in it, but this is something that, to me, it's relatively clear what we're trying to do, and getting there is a different story, of course. But the point is that what I see is more fundamental issues of people looking at their duplicates once or twice a year instead of as soon as the data come out of the lab. Mm-hmm. You want to do that. The quality control. This is, the quality control as a concept wasn't exactly invented by exploration industry. This is about manufacturing, making sure that your output is consistent, right?
Yep,
so
that's it.
How do you make sure that your output is consistent? By every time you get an output, to check it against previous outputs and make sure that it's in line with whatever your tolerance levels are. And that's what we don't even do properly in our industry.
Now you've really touched on one of my favorite subjects. So now you've done it, but the problem, I guess, particularly with the lab QC, is that we don't even have the ability to stop and check that system as it is moving, and doing its thing, because we get those data back far later, and before we actually have a real chance to look at it, the horse is bolted. The next batches have gone in, and the days have gone past. It's not quality control anymore. Whereas the lab, they actually do or should do quality control, and the red flag goes up when the AAS machine is over whatever it is, that the C class says it should be, and the flag goes up, they stop it, they fix it, and they address it, being quality control, and it's in control because you stop the system. We don't even have the ability as explorationists to actually stop and address it. I mean, your classic example is the RC rig, where you get the weights on your desk of the bag 6 months later. I mean, there's nothing I can do from a QC. Can you just QC those data? No, because the rig is gone and all the samples are already in the database. There is no QC to be done because that process has finished. And so you're right. I mean, we've got a few simple early hurdles to get across before we even can discuss what we can do with the data if it is actually properly quality controlled in the first place. Because the other problem that we have I'm not a statistician, but if you want to do proper SPC on it and the data were not in control, then you're also breaking a few rules, right? So there's such a minefield, yeah.
I mean, I should say on most reputable labs do their in-house QC consistently and reliably. But you're right. Like the biggest problem there is the lab turnaround times, mm-hmm. and we've seen this over the last couple of years, actually, especially in Canada, where the field season's short and people submit all the last samples in September, October, and
mm-hmm.
some of them are still just receiving them now, which that's a bit of a problem. So we have some logistical hurdles there to clear even before we can.
Well,
Something like
that's my personal mission. That I'm sure you'll see a little bit more from me there in that space. But hopefully, we can at some point also get together on this, as a community on this data collaboration. I mean, again, maybe just to finish off on that subject. If anybody is interested in that or is listening in or knows who to talk to who's already doing this stuff, I'd obviously be very keen to learn more. I mean, maybe this is already being done for 10 years by a group somewhere that neither you or I know anything about. Love to know, because this is an area where we can invent and get the hell off this planet, I guess, Pim. Get to Mars.
Yeah, so, some people call me woke or commie or whatever. I don't, I just shake my head and laugh, because it's quite far from it. The point, I guess, again, like to sort of step back at a higher level philosophically, I kind of feel that we, especially in North America, we've been, there's so much. Everything is about competition and being the top of your class, and if you're not the top 5% of your class, then you might as well not be.
Yeah.
That thinking of you always have to outcompete everybody else. That's sort of getting in the way of making progress in the space that we work in right now, right? So we have this idea that everybody else is the competition, and we, if we let them know what we do, then then they're going to steal our IP. Yeah, and to get back to your first point, what is your IP? What is it all about? Yeah. Are we just reinventing the wheel all over and over and over again? And I see that as a consultant with different companies. Yeah. I see that a lot of companies are reinventing the wheel all the time.
They are. No, so it's a good point, and that actually triggered another thought, because I was recently recommended this book, and some people have heard me go on about this bloody book, and it's not the Bible or anything, but it was an interesting read, because it brought a few points together for me in terms of some of these thoughts and so. And it's by Daniel Pink, and it's called Drive. I'm not sure if you heard of it, but it's about what motivates people, right? And look, again, you'll probably read it and you go like, yeah, a lot of these things just make sense. But what interested me was the pickup that the business world has changed around us, quite dramatically so. It's not just about making profits at whatever cost anymore. It's about solving problems together. It's about collaboration more. People are not motivated by just dollars and incentives to hit every year. That classic, and I'm probably saying Wall Street for no other reason than that's the easiest word to use here, but for that classic sort of competitive space where, you need to outperform one another. And that is not going to work. That is not going to stick. And incidentally, that's how I modeled my entire company on that same premise. So that's why I kind of gelled with that book, because it makes so much more sense. A bunch of people don't want to just come together to make as much money as they can, specifically not in 2023. Does me make that woke? Well, I don't fucking care if it makes me woke, it's just, thinking has changed and businesses have changed, and too many business, I believe, are not picking up on that. And this fits right into that. So maybe, it's taking it somewhere else altogether again, but listening to you describing that culture, which is what it is exactly, I think, what needs to change. And woke, call us woke and commies, but I don't think so for sure. It's just a changing world, right?
It is. And going back to ESG is also not some fluffy idealism. ESG is just recognizing the risks that you as a company carry in the space of your environmental, social, and governance performance, which means that there is a direct also monetary risk involved, the liability involved with getting it wrong. So there's more and more incentives, more and more pressure from investors and legislative bodies to get this right and to include those performance parameters in your overall performance. And if there's still people out there saying, we can just ignore that stuff and just go after the fast and the fast profit, you're gonna be outpaced at some point.
Well,
it's
ignored at your risk.
Just pragmatic measures. It's not fluffy idealism.
No, you're right, and that's where maybe coming back all the way to the start again, where perhaps we feel ourselves being not stuck in the middle, but you can definitely feel the pull of the conservative establishment that says, geez, do we have to do all this stuff? And yeah, we'll do it because we have to, but not because we truly believe in it. And then there is obviously the younger guard who have this as their primary pillar in life. And I think, if I say we, I'm not sure if that's true, but I feel like I acknowledge it as something, it's our responsibility to get right. But at the same token, I'm also worried about overcorrecting, and there are some conservative values in that space that still apply. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't change because the world is demanding that from us. We can sit here and say, well, the world shouldn't change, but far out, it is changing. Mm-hmm. And if you're not acknowledging that, you're going to go under as a company. And then you can say that, well, at least I wasn't woke while I was doing it, but you still have nothing left. So, I agree. We need to, we need to look at that more. And nice to hear that you've landed in a place where you can, do all of that, right? And really be, because that's why you probably work for that group, right? It's a culture that you support, and it's a vision that you really subscribe to. So I quite respect that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not. It's really, in the consulting space, it's helping clients prepare for what comes next, right? And this is coming, and it's growing, and it's not going to go away. And if you take it one step further back, one level higher, I would say, looking at the world and where we're going as an industry. I don't know if you follow, Simon Michaud's little side studies in. He was at he was in Australia, JKMRC, and now he's at GTK in Finland. But Dave Lowy also gave a talk about copper, and the point that there is no way that we can reach our goals, our climate goals, or our collective, sustainability goals by we're not mining the metals fast enough to bring about the energy transition. So short of cutting back on by huge measures in terms of energy consumption, we are going to be pushed to develop and produce metals at unprecedented rates.
Pace, yeah.
And if you listen to Dave Lowy's talk, like he can say, he'll say like lithium and cobalt, the relatively new or novel commodities, there's still a lot of stretch, right? Historically we haven't produced those at maximum levels. Copper, however, we've pushed copper to be produced at maximum rates for the last 20, 30 years, if not more. There's not a lot of stretch there. We can't just double production next year. Yeah. There's just no physical way of doing it. So the physical reality, it's starting to clue in. I think our industry is seeing it first. People who are aware of this, it's like there are physical limitations to what we can produce in terms of metals to bring about the energy transition. So we're in a bind. And then some people say, well, out the door with that, throw that out the window. We'll just go back to oil and gas and produce more of that, which is also not the solution. We all know that. Yeah. So, some people, they're still deniers, but that's fine. Keep everybody's entitled to their opinions, and I'm just voicing mine here. But I do see that there's some real tough nuts to crack, and I think we can be part of that solution, or we can try and keep blocking it. But I don't know.
Well, look, here's a crazy thought. I mean, so I agree with everything you said there, but if you just look at, the banks are crashing all the way around us right now. Bitcoin wasn't the thing. Maybe the cannabis stocks that were popular in Canada in the last 5 years, maybe those weren't the thing either. Now that Europe is suddenly waking up and going like, maybe we should actually mine some good stuff, and actually maybe that's a good way forward. I'm getting the sense that suddenly it might actually, that we're the solution rather than the problem, might actually spill over into the retail investors that might have otherwise to put their money in crazy things like that, to actually think, no, this is actually genuinely a good place to invest. And that might actually be, the turning point. I almost feel like the polarity of the earth is kind of changing right around us as we speak, but it's obviously going slow, so it's hard to sense it. But, I've called it before on this channel, but I feel that we're actually in that sort of maelstrom at the moment where that is actually happening, that we might in 10 or 20 years find ourselves more popular, and that the ESG thing is now well embedded, and we're doing things quote unquote right. And I'm sure there'll be plenty of things that go wrong, because that's just life. Things go wrong. Dams will very unfortunately fail, and natural disasters that we could have prevented will happen. But there is going to be an overall push into this space, because it will have to, almost. But if not, then it's not going to come from recycling, right? I mean, that's the only argument that people are trying to float. It has a role to play.
You can't recycle what you haven't produced yet.
No, well, that's the other thing, right? And it's still a capitalist society, so I struggle to see that working on an Excel sheet. But look, geez, we can go around in circles forever, man. I really enjoyed this discussion. Anything else on your mind that you wanted to throw out there, or?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I like that last point about being part of the solution. At the same time, it doesn't let us off the hook, right? We still have an image. It's not just the image problem. We also there are so many ways we can still improve. And it came to me about 10 years ago when I thought, should I still be in this business? It's so slow. It's so slow to change. It's so there's where's the cutting edge in this space? And then I had this little moment where I just looked at it from the other side and thought, hey, wait a minute. There's so much room for improvement that, this is, it's pretty, like it's easier to make a dent here than going into, high tech or data science or, trying to push the envelope there.
Yeah.
You really have to be, you have to be that top of the glass, point in the point percentile somewhere. But here there is so much room for improvement, so much opportunity that really excites me. So I do see that we've come a long way with our competitive mindsets, and I think if we embrace more of the collaborative bits, we can still leap so much further. So that's what I'm just sort of a wrap up statement. That's where I see that just let's do it.
Well, that's actually really motivating, because I speak to a lot of people, in younger people in the industry, that kind of don't see the overall motivation, and there's not enough innovation, and that we're just mucking along as an industry. But you know what? We're not. We're actually, if you look for it and if you put yourself into the mix, be part of the solution, and really look for that group who can support that, or the people around you. There's a lot happening, and indeed, I mean, people, to summarize that message maybe in a different way, we shouldn't just sit here thinking, we can't do anything about it anyway. We not want to turn into nihilists. We can actually make a change here, and I like that. It's an inspiring comment to close on. But look, thanks so much for coming on the show, man. I really appreciate it. And maybe next time at PDAC we'll catch up for a beer. But it's been really enjoyable. So thanks so much.
Sounds good. Thanks, Rene. It was a pleasure.